You're listening to American Medicine Today, presented by the Bonati Spine Institute, featuring the internationally acclaimed inventor of the Bonati spine procedures, Alfred Bonati, MD. Once again, here are Dr. Bonati and your host, Kimberly Brumell.
Thank you for joining us on American Medicine Today. I'm Kimberly Brumell alongside Ethan Euchre.
Glad to be here.
Jeff Wagstaff, our senior fellow.
That's code for the old guy.
And over yonder, without his microphone on, that is world-renowned orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Alfred Bonati of the esteemed Bonati Spine Institute.
I'm here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have our next guest on the phone. He's an emergency physician and television personality, Dr. Davis Stork.
Travis?
Travis Stork.
Take two.
Oh.
Start from the top.
Okay.
See, you were all nervous about this whole Bachelor
so
intro.
reset?
Yes.
Okay. It's a pleasure to have our next guest on the phone. He is an emergency physician and television personality, Dr. Travis Stork, host of the syndicated daytime talk show The Doctors and New York Times bestselling author of The Lose Your Belly Diet, Change Your Gut, Change Your Life. Thank you for being here, Dr. Stork.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes.
And Dr. Travis, now I got to ask you before we get into the book, do you get recognized more for being The Bachelor or from your work on The Doctors? Because I got to tell you, Brittany, our social media guru, Daisy over here, who's one of our videographers, they're all gushing when I told them that Dr. Travis Stork was going to be on the show.
Well, I must say that it's definitely The Doctors because that was so long ago. It's almost 12 years ago now.
Has it been that long?
Having
Wow.
said that, I never realized when I ended up doing that, I didn't know a ton about it. I never realized how incredibly popular that franchise is. So yeah, there are still people who will pick me out of a crowd and say, "Wait a minute, you were on The Bachelor," and I forget, to be honest with you.
But were you The Bachelor, or were you one of the many guys that a lady was choosing from?
He was The Bachelor.
That's why
Yeah,
it's
I
not
was
The
actually,
Bachelor.
To be honest with you, it's a great story. I was with some ER colleagues at a restaurant in Nashville. This is 12 years ago, on a Friday after shift, and a casting director came up to us, and next thing you know, they said that they were going to be doing The Bachelor in Paris. So yeah, everything just kind of worked out, and everyone supported me and took over my shifts while I was gone, and I went to Paris. They put me up in a chateau, and it was a great experience. But obviously, that was just a one-time unique thing in my life. And one of the things I love now is I never really planned to be on TV, and it wasn't really a goal of mine. But now, obviously, we're approaching our 10th season of The Doctors. So
Great show, by the way.
It's been a whirlwind, but really I could never have predicted it, but really appreciative for the ability now to use my voice as a physician.
It opens doors, yeah. I actually DVR The Doctors every day because it gives me ideas for the show. It's a great show.
Well, that's the thing about it is, and you all know this with your show, when we started The Doctors, everyone asked us, how are you going to do this for an hour every day? And it's like I tell people all the time, when you go to medical school, they tell you that 10 years from now, 50% of what you learn is probably going to change. And we know now with medicine and technology, things change so quickly that we're never at a loss for stories. We're never at a loss to talk about new subjects or how things are changing. And so that's why I think medicine and health is so fascinating, because even the things I do now are different than 9 years ago when I started hosting The Doctors, based upon all the things we learn.
Right. Well, your latest book is all about the gut. And, can you tell us what the gut or the microbiome is for people that may not know?
Well, it's a classic example of what I was just talking about. When I went to medical school, we didn't even talk about a gut microbiome. We didn't even really talk about good bacteria. So for people listening who haven't heard of it, gut microbiome basically refers to all the bacteria that live in your gut and reside there. And it may not seem like a big deal, but this mass can be up to 100 trillion cells, and it can weigh up to 6 pounds. And over the last few years, we've begun to realize how much of a role these bacteria play in not only how much we weigh, but our risk for everything from autoimmune illnesses to, what the list goes on. And it's such a new discovery that even a lot of doctors out there are not yet aware of what a big role this plays. So I decided to write this book because it really did. It changed the way I was eating. It changed the way I use everything from antibacterial soaps to being extremely vigilant with taking or prescribing antibiotics. And so
Right.
it's been such an interesting topic for me to delve into because it's so different than what we learned in medical school.
Okay, have to ask, because as soon as I hear antibiotics and I hear gut and microbiome, first word pops to mind, probiotics.
Good or bad?
And I love that you said it. So in the book, I talk about, I recommend everyone eat a probiotic food every day. And so, as we know, a lot of antibiotics are overprescribed in our country. And when you
Yes.
take antibiotics, sometimes you need them to kill off bad bacteria. But when that happens, you also kill off these good bacteria.
Correct.
And what I love about when people include probiotics every day, and it can be their favorite probiotic food. It could be something as simple as yogurt or kefir, or it could be kombucha, whatever people want. What you're doing is you're replenishing those good bacteria so that, let's just say theoretically, you have been on a course of antibiotics, or maybe for whatever reason you don't have the most robust gut microbiome. What research has shown is that by changing your diet very quickly, within a few days, you can start to build up those good bacteria. And that's, the jury's still out on who benefits from a probiotic supplement. What I say in the book is, for most people, I just recommend eating probiotic foods.
Okay.
Doc, how would you know if you had a healthy gut or not?
Well, to some extent, the jury is still out. We're learning so much, but what we found now is that lean people have about 70% more gut bacteria. We've also learned that certain bacteria are associated with obesity and leanness. And, one of the things I did for the book is I went and had my stool analyzed for the bacteria I had in it. But as I talk about in the book, we're not really at a point yet where you can look at your analysis and say, okay, this is good or this is bad. But I think what we will do probably over the next 5 to 10 years is we probably will be at a place where you can go to your doctor, they'll take a stool sample, and we'll be able to finagle your microbiome a little more, I don't want to say scientifically, but probably we will be able to. And I would say the biggest thing is this, is for people out there who maybe they've been struggling with maintaining a healthy weight, or maybe they have just GI problems and they don't feel well. A lot of times that can be because of an imbalance in their gut bacteria. And what's cool about when I wrote the Lose Your Belly diet, I wasn't just focusing on weight loss. I was focusing on change your gut, change your life. And the other thing that we found is that people who can up their fiber intake, which we call that prebiotics, because fiber is food for your gut bacteria. We don't digest it. It works its way through your GI tract, and those good bacteria feed off of it. So what's really cool is people who maybe they eat a lot of refined carbohydrates and don't get a lot of fruits or vegetables or whole grains. If you switch to eating more of those foods, like I said earlier, within a few days, you can actually see this robust growth in good bacteria. And I think that's one of the huge positives I learned in researching for the book.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yes.
Certainly people need to go check it out. Unfortunately, out of time, but people not only should get the book, but should watch The Doctors with
Yes.
Dr. Travis Stork every day. Great show.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all for that, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Dr. Travis Stork, host of the syndicated daytime talk show The Doctors, and New York Times bestselling author of The Lose Your Belly Diet, Change Your Gut, Change Your Life. Thank you for being on the program.
Of course. Have a good day.
You too.
You too. Thanks, Dr. Stork. Great guy.
Yes. Make sure you stay tuned because we're going to hear a story of recovery coming up after the break. Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonati created, perfected, and patented the Bonati spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonati invented precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonati spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 50,000 successful procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Over half our patients have suffered from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonati succeeds where others fail.
You're listening to American Medicine Today, presented by the Bonati Spine Institute, featuring the internationally acclaimed inventor of the Bonati Spine procedures, Alfred Bonati, MD. Once again, here are Dr. Bonati and your host, Kimberly Bermel.
Thank you for listening to American Medicine Today. We are back. I'm Kimberly Bermel, joined by Ethan Euchre.
Glad to be here.
Our senior fellow, Jeff Wagstaff.
Hello.
And world-renowned orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Alfred Bonati of the esteemed Bonati Spine Institute.
You're copying my introduction.
Well, you know what sets Bonati apart from others on the market? Well, lots of things. He has his own patented methods and tools to bring true relief of pain to his patients. And other things on the market don't. Now, there's a term called minimally invasive, and everyone has jumped on that bandwagon. But not all minimally invasive procedures are the same. The targeted precision Bonati spine procedures are worlds apart from what others in the marketplace are calling minimally invasive. He doesn't do invasive things like putting screws and plates and wires into people's backs under the guise of minimally invasive. No, there is no place for that in your back. What he does is he has actual patented methods that go in and remove those things that get mangled and tangled within one's nerves. So we always like to say, don't be confused by other lesser spine institutes that are on the market that tell you you need those things. Those things need to remain in your toolbox. When you think about pain resolve, you don't want to treat a symptom. You want to get to that true root cause of the pain, and you can do that with the Bonati spine procedures. With that said, we're going to hear
From a patient.
Yes.
In today's Back to Life segment, we will talk to a patient of the Bonati Spine Institute who went from living a life that was restricted by pain and discomfort through their journey of finding the Bonati Spine Institute and are now living pain-free.
My pleasure to introduce to the program Terry Birkland from, is it Frazee, Minnesota? Freezy. Okay.
Either way, it's cold.
Yes.
It is
Ooh.
It's
cold.
pretty cold in Minnesota.
Well, why do
Are you freezing in Minnesota?
Oh, it's we got a heat wave today. It's 53 degrees.
Oh my God, isn't that hot?
Break out the bikini.
53, I still wear long johns.
Okay.
53, I stay in my bed.
Well, in all seriousness, how did your pain start? Were you in an accident?
I was in an accident 5 years ago in May.
Okay. And what happened?
I was heading to work one morning and a guy blew a stop sign on the major highway and I T-boned him at 70 miles an hour.
Oh,
man.
Ouch. So I would assume that after that you had a lot of pain. Can you kind of describe where that pain was on your body, and was it localized? Can you tell us?
Well, I had pain in my neck and I had pain in my low back and for whatever reason that day I decided to wear my seatbelt, which normally it's a very rare occasion that I ever do, but ever since then I've been wearing it ever since. But that day, for whatever reason, I put my seatbelt on, and that kept me from flying through the windshield
Thank
and
goodness.
everything else. But I'm sure it kept me stationary in my seat to where everything in my back and my body all went forward, obviously, and that's what created, probably 90% of the problems.
Wow. So when you talk about that pain, you say in your back, so it was a shooting pain, it was a numbing pain that went to other areas of your body?
Oh yeah, it was in my back. It would run down my legs,
Okay.
and after a while, it got to the point where I'd be walking down the sidewalk, and it was like my leg would just quit, and I would almost tip over or fall over. I could regain my balance and catch myself or whatever, but
Oh, that's
the
dangerous.
biggest times when I'd notice the pain is when I would be sitting in a vehicle trying to drive. I could only maybe drive a half hour, 45 minutes because of the position I was in. It just hurt so bad that I couldn't take it anymore.
Goodness. So in what other ways was it impacting your life? Obviously, getting around in a car, you said walking was difficult. Getting in and out of bed and I guess maybe just getting dressed. Why don't you tell what other activities that affected in your daily life?
It affected all of that.
Okay.
I couldn't lay flat on my back to sleep. I had to sleep on my side for the longest time.
Okay.
I basically had to give up my welding profession because I couldn't
Oh,
twist and bend and get into all the angles that I used to do, and
sure.
that affected me a big way.
So, what did you do at that point? Did you try any conservative type treatment? I mean, you couldn't possibly just live in that kind of pain doing nothing. So, what were some of your options?
I started out probably a month or two after the accident. I started seeing my chiropractor
Okay,
to try to keep everything limbered up, and
sure.
it just wasn't working. So he had recommended that I went to a doctor here in Minnesota to do some like cortisone injections or whatnot to try to numb the pain or whatnot. So I did that a couple times, and the first time I did it, it worked for 4, 5, 6 months, whatever.
Okay.
And then I had to go back and do it again. Well, the second time I went and I talked to the doctor, and he's like, well, yeah, these are only good for maybe 7, 8, 9 months total. And he said, then you'll have to come back and do it again. And I'm like, well, I got to do this the rest of my life. I'm only, I think at the time I was 37 years old or whatever.
So a
and
young
I'm
man.
thinking, I'm not going to do this for the next 60 years.
Right.
I said, there's got to be something different. He's like, well, we can do a nerve ablation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they went in and they burned off all the nerve endings
Okay.
in my back, and that worked, for probably 8 months, and that was okay. But then there again, it was your nerves grow back over time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I was back to square one again. I'm like, I don't want to keep doing this either. So he recommended that I went and saw Dr. Sonny Kim, who's a world-renowned spine and back surgeon or whatever, but he specializes more in the spinal fusion.
Right.
And I met with him and all that, and that didn't really, to me, that was the only point or option I had because there was nothing else up here in Minnesota and, in the Midwest. So that's what I was going to end up doing. Well, I ended up seeing a mechanic friend of mine who was fixing my car, and he had happened to be at the Bonati Spine Institute about 3 years prior, and he's like, here, he goes, check these guys out. And that's when the whole process started. That's why I ended up down there in Hudson there at Bonati there to get my stuff done.
Right, right. So, well, thank goodness, because we talk about fusions all the time. And someone going in for a one-level fusion, the failure rate on that is between 60 and 65%. And if 2 or more levels are targeted, the failure rate is 85%, which is staggering failure rates. And even the small percentage that they claim are successful, within 2 years, 75 to 78% of those fail. So we end up seeing those people all the time. So thank goodness. So you end up hearing about Bonati and their started your journey. So why don't you talk about when you first came to the Institute? What was that in-person evaluation like?
Oh, when I first got there, when I
Yes.
met with Dr. Grossmith, it
Yes.
was, he's probably the most down-to-earth person I've met. I mean, you always hear the term Midwest nice or whatever, but being there, I mean, he was straightforward with everything, and he had the little skeletal statue or whatever there that he was pointing things out, and he's like, well, after he looked at my MRIs and whatnot, he's like, well, and he goes, it's this, 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 and this, and this, and this. Well, there's like 8 different things that he pointed out, and he's like, where would you want to start first? And I'm like, well, and
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, what hurts the most? And I said, my legs. I said, they give out when I'm walking, and I have pain when I'm driving. He goes, well, then we'll start here. I believe it was the L4, L5, whatever, S1, all that.
Right.
And that's where he started first, and then he did the neck and the other side of my low back. But that's where it all started.
Okay, you're jumping ahead just a little bit because we have something called conscious IV sedation. So when you're in the OR, you will be somewhat interactive with the surgeon, answering questions, and at times watching. So have to know, did you watch your surgery?
That would be a negative.
Okay, that's okay.
Some choose not to.
Some do and some
he asked
don't.
me if I wanted to watch it. The nurse asked if I wanted to watch it, and I really didn't care. As a volunteer firefighter and first responder, I've seen enough gory stuff in my lifetime that I really didn't care to watch them do surgery on my back.
I don't blame you.
So,
Here
but
in-
was it interesting to you to remember talking to the doctor during the surgery? And we realize that you might not remember full conversations, but having that interaction, you knew why that was important, right?
Oh yeah. He was. He talked to me before he started there a little bit, and then
Sure.
I don't remember much else afterwards until he was waking me up.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't completely out, but
Correct.
I mean, they were
right until the
or
anesthesia
whatever
wears
was wearing off or whatnot,
Correct.
and bringing me back because he was going to try to have me simulate the pain where it was before, and
Right.
I couldn't really do it unless I was sitting upright.
Okay. So when we know they target things incrementally, so when they targeted that first pain, you're going to have surgery, site soreness, but the actual agonizing pain that brought you in, when did you feel a relief of that?
That first night when I was back in the hotel room, I could actually pretty much lay on my back without having the pain.
And did you think that was going to be possible so quickly?
I never thought it would be. No, I mean I've read the reviews and I've watched videos on that Bonati puts out, and the reviews that people rave about,
Yes.
and I was just like, well, okay, that was one of the things that made me decide to go there, other than my friend telling me. But I figured why not? What do I got to lose at this point?
And are you back to doing some of the activities since you're feeling better? Are you back to doing some of the things that you had to put off because you were living life on the sidelines at that point?
I can do pretty much just about all the things I used to. I just probably can't do it for as long as I used to. I used to work as a welder and a fabricator.
Right.
And to be on my feet for 10, 12 hours a day, I probably can't do that anymore without taking breaks. But,
Right.
I mean, if I can take a break, that's no big deal. I can relax, sit down for a little bit, and then go back to work. That's more than what I could do before.
And there you go. So regaining your strength and getting back in motion. Thank you so much for sharing your story of recovery with us.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Enjoy the heat wave up there in Minnesota.
Terry sounds like a hockey fan to me.
Doc, you should send some up here. We could use some more heat.
Yeah, right.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks,
You
Terry.
take care.
All right, thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So
I just love that accent. Minnesota.
He sounds like a hockey player.
Right. Oh, I'll punch you right in the mouth. Well, then we'll go play hockey. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
well, if you are suffering in the type of pain that Terry did, make sure you reach out to Bonati at 855-267-0483. And make sure you stay tuned, because coming up after the break, we're going to talk about something called cancer epigenetics. Wonder what that's about. Make sure you stay tuned. You're listening to American Medicine Today. Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonati created, perfected, and patented the Bonati spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonati invented precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonati spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 50,000 successful procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Over half our patients have suffered from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonati succeeds where others fail.
You're listening to American Medicine Today, presented by the Bonati Spine Institute, featuring the internationally acclaimed inventor of the Bonati spine procedures, Alfred Bonati, MD. Once again, here are Dr. Bonati and your host, Kimberly Brumell.
Thank you for listening to American Medicine Today. I'm Kimberly Brumell, joined by Ethan Euchre,
Glad to be here.
Junior Mint Jeff Wagstaff.
Thanks for having me, Kimberly.
Absolutely. And world-renowned orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Alfred Bonati of the Bonati Spine Institute.
Thank you for allowing me to stay here.
Yes. Always.
Your name's on the
always.
show, Doc. You got to be here.
So, epigenetics is a complicated but very important study of cells, and joining us right now is Dr. Sharon Dent, Director of the Center for Cancer Epigenetics at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas. Now, she's going to explain why this difficult science is so important. Thank you for joining us, Sharon.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Now, Dr. Dent, she received a phone call from me, or at least a contact email, because we had a doctor on a few weeks back who mentioned just in passing during his interview, epigenetics is the future of medicine. And that put a click, a red flag in my head. I wrote down epigenetics, and I found that Dr. Dent here is one of the most, recognized, knowledgeable experts in the field. She focuses on cancer, but let's just put a big umbrella over epigenetics because it is such a complex, complicated topic. Break it down for the lay people. Talk to us like we're in 6th grade, as Jeff said.
Start with me.
Dr. Dent?
Sure. So if you think about the cell as a little machine that has to be able to use energy in order to do its job, every cell has its own function, but, we have different kinds of cells. We have eye cells that help us see. We have liver cells. We have, other kinds of cells in our body. What most people don't realize is that every single cell, no matter what kind of cell it is, has exactly the same genetic blueprint.
Right.
But the cells can interpret that blueprint differently so that they know how to read the information in the blueprint that they need to do their particular function. So in the eye cells read that part of the blueprint, but they don't read the part of the blueprint for the liver. And what we've come to appreciate is that the way the blueprint is organized within the cells helps the cells to focus on the information they need and ignore everything else. And so since the blueprint is the genetic information, and this is information on top of that genetic information, we call that epigenetic.
Okay.
By understanding this basic premise, does it help researchers or physicians better treat patients when they incur an illness because of this understanding?
So here's the thing. Basically, epigenetics is a problem in folding. You can think of it as a little origami of structure within the cell nucleus, which means that it's changeable. So oftentimes in disease, what happens is the cell starts reading the wrong part of the blueprint because the blueprint has been misfolded. So there are two things then that you can try to take from that. One, you can try to understand how the blueprint should be folded, and then you can try to understand what controls that folding. And with those two things under your belt, you can try to correct the misfolded blueprint back to its normal state.
Yeah, you actually, when I spoke with you, Dr. Dent, in the pre-interview, you had a great analogy about, have you ever tried to build something from IKEA? And then
Right.
tell everybody that, because that's kind of what helped me wrap my head around this as well. It was a great analogy.
Right. Yeah, so if you've ever bought anything from IKEA, you come home, you open the box, you lay out all this stuff, and then you start looking at the instruction book. And it works if you begin at the beginning and you do everything stepwise, number 1, number 2, number 3, and then you turn the page and you do the next step. But have you ever had an instance where you read the instruction, you start doing the job, and then something happens and you look down and now the blueprint, the instruction booklet may have not be on the same page anymore. And then you start trying to, continue the job, but you're at a different point in the instruction set. And it just becomes very confusing and impossible to go forward until you self-correct, until you get back to the right point in the set of instructions and can continue where you left off. So just imagine having that incredibly complicated blueprint and having to find exactly the right place at exactly the right time in the cell, and being able then for the cell to do what it needs to do.
So if someone has a certain disease, what you're saying is through epigenetics, we can try to flip switches maybe,
Exactly.
and if there's a disease, you teach, I guess, the cells to turn off
Or on.
or right, if it's damaging, or on if it's good.
Yeah, and it even gets to be more of a systems problem. So
Okay.
going back to my analogy with the blueprint and the eye cell reading the eye information and the liver cell reading the liver information, imagine that an eye is now trying to be a liver. That's a disastrous situation.
Right.
And in fact, in a number of cancers, for example, what happens is the cell has lost its identity. It no longer knows what it's supposed to be. And because of that, it doesn't know when to stop growing. It doesn't know that it's supposed to stay in place. It starts trying to migrate around, ending up with metastasis. And so, again, it's all, I'm not saying epigenetics is the answer to everything, but it is definitely a contributing factor in confusing the cell when the folding has gone wrong.
And
Is that making sense?
yeah, that does. The only thing is that how you plan to correct that, how you teach the cell to go back to their origin and go forward.
Exactly. And so that gets back then to really understanding how the folding occurs and how the folding is regulated. And I don't want to get too technical, but there are specialized proteins within the cell nucleus that serve as a scaffold for the folding of the blueprint. And then there are other proteins which actually help to do the job of the folding. And we're learning more and more about what all of these proteins are, where they should be active, when they should be active. And what's very exciting is that those proteins themselves are amenable to design of small molecule drugs that could change their activity. And so I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's like, you know how what the shape should be, and if you know what the tools are, then, and if you know how to control the tools, this is a lot of ifs, right? But if you have all of that there, then you've got a really powerful way of helping to encourage the folding to happen more correctly.
Yeah, what you are saying practically is you are learning how how the cell lose their path and they need to come back to reestablish their path. But my question is, do you have any way to do that? Do you have any technique to do that? Do you have any medication, any treatment, any direction? How this direction to reestablish the cell?
Right.
How you do it?
Right. So again, I'm trying to avoid being too technical, but there are at least a couple of drugs in clinical trials that are based on changing the nature of how the DNA blueprint interacts with the specialized proteins that serve as the scaffold for the blueprint folding. Those proteins are called histones. So, for example, there are histone deacetylase inhibitors in clinical trials that change the chemical nature of the scaffold, which then changes the way the DNA interacts with the scaffold and can change the folding of the cell. And in particular, these drugs tend to affect the expression of genes which we call tumor suppressors. So normally those are genes that can, as the name implies, suppress the growth of the cancer. And those genes, for a number of different reasons, get turned off, and that allows cancers to grow. So the HDAC inhibitors do the reverse. They turn those genes back on, which then turns the cancer off.
So
I'm painting this all as black and white, but of course, there's, like with any drug, there's degrees of effect versus not, depending on the particular disease situation.
So this is more directed to investigate and correct cancer, but that can be also applied to other type of problems like rheumatoid arthritis or degenerative cases or
I don't know about arthritis in particular, although definitely inflammation pathways which are associated with arthritis activate a lot of these epigenetic proteins. But it is thought that epigenetics can contribute to neurodegenerative diseases, and also that it's just the process of epigenetics is important to laying down memory in our brains. All of that is still at a very early stage, I would say, of investigation, but I personally find that very exciting.
What do you think the future holds for epigenetics?
I think the most promising is that. Let me put it this way. I think epigenetics is sort of a diplomatic approach to fighting disease. It's because you're not asking the cell to. You're asking a cell to correct its behavior. So if you can use these drugs to get the cell back on the right page of the blueprint and to begin acting like it's supposed to, then that, even if you don't get all the way there, you may be able to use epigenetic drugs in combination with more standard therapies for cancer, for neurodegenerative diseases, etc. And so together, you may have two drugs that work, partially, and then if you put them together, maybe they'll be even stronger. So I see the future of epigenetics as not only helping us understand how cells read the right part of the blueprint, but also how to get back to the right page alone or in combination with the use of other agents.
Pretty complex stuff. Dr. Sharon Dent, Director of the Center of Cancer Epigenetics at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas. Thank you for trying to shed some light on what this is all about.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Dr.
Thank
Dent.
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I told you it was super complex.
Wow.
But
Yeah,
fantastic.
you broke it down and you
Doc
brought
broke
it
it
to a
down
level that was more understandable.
The gist of it is, and
Yes.
her research focuses on cancer. That's why she spent
Correct.
a lot of time talking about cancer. She focuses
Specific.
specifically on cancer. But the gist of it is, if you can figure out a disease and what switches to turn off in certain genes, you can eliminate that disease. And that's what they're working on.
Yeah, what's amazing, it can be applied to everything.
Right.
Yes.
Because the only thing that you need to do is you need to identify the cell that is sick and then bring them back to the normal cell and then stimulate the normal progress.
It's like hitting a reset button.
Exactly. It's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
The next phase of medicine.
Yep,
Yeah.
very cool.
Well, make sure you stay tuned because we're going to talk about some exciting stuff. I think it's like computer brain interface information. Make sure you stay tuned. You're listening to American Medicine Today.
I thought that
Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonati created, perfected, and patented the Bonati spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonati invented precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonati spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 50,000 successful procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Over half our patients have suffered from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonati succeeds where others fail.
You're listening to American Medicine Today, presented by the Bonati Spine Institute, featuring the internationally acclaimed inventor of the Bonati spine procedures, Alfred Bonati, MD. Once again, here are Dr. Bonati and your host, Kimberly Brumell.
Thanks for listening to American Medicine Today. I'm with Ethan Euchre,
Glad to be here.
Jeff Wagstaff,
Thank you for having me.
and world-renowned orthopedic surgeon Dr. Alfred Bonati of the Bonati Spine Institute.
Hi.
Let's look at what's new in medicine today, featuring Alfred Bonati, MD.
Okay, this is such an interesting topic, and from what I was reading, would you classify this as a computer-brain interface type story?
Yeah, it's similar. Basically, Doc knows the story. Basically,
Who says so?
you're the one that said, hey, I want to talk
it's
about this
fascinating.
topic. Yeah, these engineers basically came up with a device that helped a paralyzed man who had been in an accident. He's now able to move his arm. They even had video of it. He was
Yes.
eating cereal and things like that.
But he was told
Pretty
he'd be a
interesting stuff.
quadriplegic. Yeah.
Oh, good.
That's all you got?
No. Well, this is from March 28th of this year. Apparently, this guy named Bill was 48 and he was riding his bike for a charity event and he collided with some sort of mail truck. And as a result, they say he fractured his fifth cervical vertebrae and he became a quadriplegic.
Right.
So, 8 years later, at age 56, he's now able to use his right arm. And it's amazing because this device, even though they say between the computer brain interface, all he has to do is think about it and he moves. They talk about how the movements aren't refined completely yet. That'll take some time, but at least he's able to make the movements. It's amazing technology.
Yeah, it's still very rudimentary. I mean,
Yes.
it's not. He's basically the guinea pig for this thing,
Right.
but it works.
Well, but it
Right.
sounds like he's driving the Model T now. In a few
Right.
years, there'll be a Tesla out that maybe can help people paralyzed function more.
Well, remember that they said that the fracture was on the fifth vertebra.
Yes.
Usually will compromise if it explode that vertebra, the nerves that are going to be affected, the one above. So he's lucky because if that fracture will be a little higher, then he will compromise his breathing mechanisms and he will die.
Okay.
But at this level, he still has some function of some muscles. And if the fifth nerve was spare, then he's going to have a bicep type of emotion that will help him. Seems to be by the article that he doesn't have any motion on the arm. So if he doesn't have any motion on the arm, then the fifth nerve was injured. I mean, the fracture affect the fifth nerve.
Right.
So the fourth nerve will be the one that will be affected or will be free. So he may have some type of a reaction, some of the muscles in the front of the chest and a little bit of, probably some little bit of the bicep. The beauty of the idea is to bypass an injured spinal cord with an electrical device with chips,
Right.
and then use the computer to be able to allow him to perform.
Right.
Well, I always said that if we can bypass the area of the fracture and we reconnect the nerves below, probably we will have some type of emotion.
Right.
Now, what by the knowledge of a spinal injury, once you have a damage on the spinal injury, the nerves that they go on the small canals of that spinal cord, they degenerate very fast.
Right.
So you cannot make that thing function. If they will be very early, and the spinal cord injury will happen today, and then in a couple of hours, we'll use this system to reconnect, the nerves will be still there.
Right.
And then if they stimulate those nerves, you will have motion. Now, this gentleman had the injury and waited several years before he got this device.
Right.
So all those nerves from the spinal cord are being destroyed. The distal part of the nerve is destroyed. So there's no way that he's going to come back. But they start to teach the muscles. What they did is they bypass the spinal cord. They get the brain to think.
Right.
And then the computer was placing different muscles on the arm, and that information there allows these muscles to work.
What was so exciting about this, though, they talk about mapping his brain so they knew where to place the electrodes, and they put him in an MRI, and they asked him to imagine moving different parts of his body. And when those areas lit up, for them, that was the map to exactly where they needed to place the device. So when he thought about it, boom, here the movement happened. Not refined yet, like you said, it's still rudimentary, but huge advancement.
Well, incredible.
Well, they're
Yeah.
saying that some of the things that he was initially able to do 3 tasks, which I think was eating, drinking, and nose scratching with 80 to 100%
Yes.
accuracy just from thinking. And again, this is basically a prototype.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think the spinal injuries will be divided into 2 different categories, and these ones that they are chronic injuries, they maybe get this type of devices to help. But I really think what we need to focus is on the very early injury. I mean, hours after the injury, they should reconnect the area of the trauma with a computer system. So if they do that, the nerves that they are going down in the distal part of the injury, they are still there. If they will be able to connect those nerves, then the full function is going to occur.
Right.
And that is what the experimentation needs to go.
Right. But that's got to be so difficult because person gets injured. where they end up, they might not have that technology. And time is really of the essence.
I think what we are going to do is we are going to create some type of microchip that is going to be placed between the area of the brain, I mean the area of the injury above the injury, and the area of the injury below the injury, and then they will put that microchip in between. If they can do that.
See, Doc, now you're giving away all your ideas. What are you doing?
Well, he'll patent them first.
If they can do that,
it's intellectual
then,
property.
Then immediately
you heard it here
will
first.
have. Okay.
Immediately
you
will
I'm
have.
not so important now.
Oh, immediately you'll have. See, I remember where you left off.
If you do that, then the connection will exist. It's like an electrical thing. The only problem is what may happen is when you do that connection, you may want to move your finger and it's going to move your toe. Because
short-circuited, if you will.
Because will be you will not be able to connect exactly the same nerve that goes here or there. So it's an amazing future using the microchip to connect this, but it's not there yet.
Well,
and that's a look at what's new in medicine today with Alfred Bonatti, MD.
Basically, instead of paralysis being a lifelong sentence, it could merely be just a temporary disability. And I think that's what's so fascinating about this topic.
Yeah.
Well, that about wraps everything up on our flagship station. So make sure you check us out on Bloomberg nationally. And hey, check us out on iHeartRadio, keyword Bonatti, and you can tweet at Dr. Bonatti using hashtag American Medicine Today or hashtag AMT. We always like to hear from you. And if you're an affiliate, make sure you stay tuned because we have
Dr. Teresa Woodruff coming up. This is really crazy. You said it's creepy. They basically made
it's creepy crazy, but cool.
A menstrual cycle in a petri dish.
Yeah, that just kind of weirds
tease.
Me out.
You want to stick around and listen to that.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. Make sure you stay tuned.
I'm not interested.
You're listening to American Medicine Today. Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonatti created, perfected, and patented the Bonatti spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonatti invented precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonatti spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 50,000 successful procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Over half our patients have suffered from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonatti succeeds where others fail.
You're listening to American Medicine Today, presented by the Bonatti Spine Institute, featuring the internationally acclaimed inventor of the Bonatti spine procedures, Alfred Bonatti, MD. Once again, here are Dr. Bonatti and your host, Kimberly Brumell.
Thank you for joining us on American Medicine Today, our affiliate segment. I am Kimberly Brumell, joined by Ethan Euchre.
Happy to be here.
Jeff Wagstaff.
Howdy.
And world-renowned orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Alfred Bonatti.
Hello.
Now, after decades of drug testing, mostly on men, a new device called the Evitar may help tailor treatments for women as well. So joining us right now is Dr. Teresa Woodruff, professor of obstetrics and gynecology at Northwestern University and one of the co-authors of the study. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Woodruff.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes. Now, I'm torn on this one. I find it fascinating yet creepy, so I do apologize.
Why do you got to apologize?
But they talk about a menstrual cycle in a petri dish, and so you've pretty much created
a reproductive system.
Yes, in a petri dish.
Yeah.
Well, really, it's not a petri dish. That's the key. A lot of people think of petri dishes because that's what we were all used to doing in biology labs in high school.
Okay.
And so what we've done is we've thrown the petri dish as far away from the laboratory as we possibly can.
Sure.
Because that doesn't really recreate the biology that we have in each of us. And namely, what that means is that we have a group of organs that all function together with the vasculature, the arteries, the capillaries, and the veins that move nutrients between organs. They communicate with each other, and then metabolic waste is eliminated. The Petri dish doesn't allow for any of that. It's basically a single set of cells flat on a piece of plastic, and that doesn't represent any cell in any of our biology.
Okay.
And the cells are basically sitting in their own metabolic waste in an incubator. And so what we've done is we've really revolutionized that kind of technology by adding microfluidics, so fluid flow between different wells where each of our tissues are placed. And we started with the reproductive tract because that really represents one of the fundamental systems that has to communicate between each other with very specific outcomes. So the ovary makes hormones like estrogen and progesterone, and the fallopian tubes respond by changing the ciliary movement to allow the oocyte to move down the tube to be fertilized. The uterus and the cervix change in their dimensions, and cells slough off as they go through a normal cycle.
Right.
And so this was a great opportunity to test whether or not microfluidics could actually support organ-level communication between tissues. And when we started, we didn't know if we could really do this. We didn't know if we could get tissues to last for 28 days, which is what we did. We didn't know if we could get them to communicate with each other. We needed a universal media, which is what our blood does for each of us. And we didn't know if the function would be supported. So I don't think there's anything creepy. I think it's revolutionary technology that supports breakthrough biology, not only for reproductive biology, but for all of biology. And I want to also say that all of this was funded by the National Institutes of Health, which is important for all of us to understand how these new tools that are going to provide personalized options for each of us in the future is being funded.
I understand why it would be important because, we're talking about in the late 50s, things weren't really tested on women at all, predominantly men. And all of a sudden, they prescribed a drug to pregnant women, which turned out to cause severe birth defects. And that's because they hadn't tested it on women.
Right. They didn't know what the effects would be on a pregnant woman because they only tested the drug on men.
So I get the fact that what's being done will help many women in this country or the world. But I mean, we're still. Are you saying that they won't ever have to test on females with the type of advancements you're making here?
No. I think what we have is a new tool in our kit that brings us from the bench to people with tools that are more like what how our own organs function. So we'll still use cells in petri dishes, but imagine now for cardiovascular disease where there are different phenomenologies that impact males and females. Bone health, for example. We've never been able to study bone or cartilage in the context of the rising and falling hormones of the female, testosterone, or estradiol and progesterone, nor with males. So we're also creating systems that provide the morning to night cycle for male hormone, testosterone, and then the outcomes that we would see on other tissues. And this is really an exciting new way of thinking about the step between the individual cell in a petri dish leading us towards animal or human biology. I think it's going to hasten drug development in a really significant way.
Will just taking organs in that one particular part of the body, though, be indicative of how it will be in a human, in the entire body?
Yeah. Right. It's one more step toward that because we've never had integration of organs ever. We have individual cells within individual wells of a petri dish. We've never connected those tissues in the way at all. And so that's how this technology will allow us to move forward. So, for example, we can now put in bone or cartilage or adipose or muscle tissues and begin to look at the biology of drugs or their effect on those tissues during a normal cycle. And that's really going to, all of us have cycling hormones, males and females. Females a 28-day cycle, males a 1-day cycle. So I'm glad I'm a female, not a male. But all of our biology really is informed by the underlying sex hormones, XX or XY, in each of our cells. And there's an imposition of these hormones. And now we're going to be able to study that biology. In the absence of studying hormones or sex as a biological variable, our cells have no hormones of either male or female. So at some level, it might be a pseudo-postmenopausal state, but not really. So we're going to amp up our ability as basic scientists to be able to understand more about the cell signaling pathways that are occurring in each of our organs using this kind of system.
Dr. Woodruff, here's my thought as you talk. I'm thinking eventually maybe, not only you've been working on just the female reproductive system. I say just like that's some minor thing, but eventually don't you think you'll be able to produce these different systems that could create essentially an entire human being? So whatever part of the body you wanted to test drugs on, you could. And here's what I was thinking. Would that replace animal testing, and would it speed up the FDA approval process because you have an apparatus that can accurately reflect how the human body would respond to these drugs down the road? And how far away are we from something like that?
Well, that's certainly the hope is that we have representations of our organs in the system so that we could use iPS cells from an individual and have a liver. In our system, we have a liver to provide the opportunity for metabolism, and each of us metabolize drugs very differently. And so being able to look at metabolism on a personalized level is going to really allow each drug to be tailored to each of us. And I think that's a really important new way to use the system. We also have islet cells that we've been using in the system, and we can actually take the insulin out of the media so that the islets, the pancreas, is producing the insulin necessary for the other tissues. And we're studying male cells as well. So we have a lot of opportunity here, and I think we'll always need to have the biological. These are proxies for true physiology. So this is biology that's representing animal or human physiology. Our hope is to eventually limit the number of animals in biomedical research and make it easier and faster and safer for these drugs to be tailored for our individuals rather than population, which is the way drugs get tested now.
Forgive me, I'm going to ask a question, and I apologize if it sounds strange, but you guys are developing organs. Are you guys also going to do like a miniature brain? Because doesn't the brain give emotion to what you're doing?
Would
so
it be
couldn't
conscious?
Well, not only that, but when you take drugs or different things, wouldn't the brain also have an effect on the outcome? Or am I wrong?
So I don't think we have. So what we're doing is we're creating models for each of the organs. So we're allowing for the normal, ordinary function of each tissue to be mimicked in the system. And the best way this system is used is through communication between organs. So the endocrine system and the nervous system are the two great communication systems of our body. And the endocrine system has hormones that communicate information between all of our tissues. And that's something that we simply can't model in ordinary systems. And so this system is going to allow for that ordinary communication that is relayed between each of our different tissues to be part of our basic science analysis of signaling pathways, to allow us to study drug interaction, to identify new drugs and how they might work, and to begin to use each of the tissues of the body in a way that is as it is in our bodies. They are communicating together, they're informing each other, they're informing the biology of downstream effects of each of the drugs. And that's what's really exciting about this new technology, is it's going to enable a new kind of biology that is going to, I think, open up a level of discovery that we haven't had in the past.
Well, we truly appreciate you coming on to discuss this, Dr. Teresa Woodruff, Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Northwestern University and one of the co-authors of the study. Thank you so much for sharing your advancement called EVATAR.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good one, Dr.
Take care.
Woodruff.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Crazy cool science,
It
sci-fi
is.
type stuff
It is.
going on there. I love it.
Wow. Who'd have thought?
Creepy, as Kimberly would say.
Sorry, I do. I think it's creepy cool. Well, that about wraps things up. Thank you for joining us on American Medicine Today. Make sure you check us out every week nationally on Bloomberg. Check us out on iHeartRadio, keyword Bonati. And if you or someone you know suffering with neck, back, sciatic pain, reach out to them at 855-267-0483 or tweet at Dr. Bonati using hashtag American Medicine Day or hashtag AMT. We always like to hear from you. Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonati created, perfected, and patented the Bonati spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonati invented precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonati spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 50,000 successful procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Over half our patients have suffered from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonati succeeds where others
others fail.